pjnet.tv shortly after 9 p.m. on the East Coast. And our guest, Sarah, is standing by. We have a bumper rolling. We have a background ready. We have a chat room waiting. So we will switch to Studio 8 in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Well, good evening and welcome to pjnet.tv, and we have a first-time guest. Folks, I hope that you will listen carefully to the story that Sarah Walton has to share, because I've seen it all over social media. I have started her book, but I'm not that far into it, so I won't be able to tell you about the book, but she can. And let's welcome Sarah Walton. Thanks for coming tonight, Sarah. You must be pretty busy.
Yes, I am. We have 4 kids, and we actually have an exchange student that lives with us too. So we are a full house with everybody home, e-learning. So it's been busy.
Well, every time I see you, you're appearing somewhere, you know.
It's been a busy couple weeks, that is to say the least. We've had a lot of interviews, which is wonderful, but it has been packed. That is for sure.
Okay. I know enough to say that this is your first book, but you co-authored. Ooh, I have the hiccups. You co-authored a book prior to this, so authoring is not new. Did your other book get this much attention?
Yeah, surprisingly, it did very well, not because of anything of who we were. It was just the Lord's doing. Nobody knew who we were. I wrote it with Kristen Weatherall, called Hope When It Hurts. And I think it just struck a nerve with people because it was basically biblical perspective on trials. And so that's kind of what we did in this one as well, but we wanted it to be specifically for marriage.
Okay. I'm still trying to make some adjustments here. Anyway, as I read your book, a couple things. Everything was fine until you got married, right?
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, I had some chronic illness stuff that I hadn't really figured out, but for the most part, yes, things had been going okay.
Okay, and your husband Jeff, the two of you got married with high hopes of starting a new life together. And how long after you got married did you start noticing things were wrong?
It probably, we had our first child when we had been married 3 years. And I think it was about 7 weeks after we had him, we had a really big scare and we thought we were going to lose him. He was in the hospital with something very serious. And so that was the first real test of our marriage, I think. New parents, you don't expect that. And so suddenly we were thrown into this terrifying situation. And then it really progressed from there. That's kind of, it only got harder from that point on. He ended up having a lot of really difficult neurological issues that continue to today, that have dictated our lives in many ways. So that was really only one layer of it. We have had lots of challenges along the way with chronic illness. I have a debilitated ankle, so I'm losing my ability to walk as well. And we've just had lots of challenges with job loss and finances. And so God has given us a lot to write about.
Okay. That's the positive way of looking at it. Every couple, I think, goes through struggles of one kind or another. Now, obviously, yours are on a scope and scale that most people never experience. You were a Christian when you got married,
Yes.
right? And Jeff?
Yes, we were both believers at that point. I had a lot of growing to do, but we were both truly believers.
And you still are.
Yeah, we will continue to. Yes, I'm reminded every day that I have a lot more growing to do.
Well, there's a lot of strain. There surely had to be a point that you started saying, "Why, God?"
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that came at a lot of different points, actually. I think when things first happen, in some ways you're in shock. You're trying to get your feet under you. I think it's been the times that things have gone on for a really long time that those are the times that I've started to wrestle with God. Why are you not removing this? Why are you not answering prayers that we're praying? And that is what has really made us wrestle with really deep theological challenges, because God doesn't always give us the why. In fact, he often doesn't give us the why. So we've had a lot of those seasons of just questioning, Lord, why are you allowing this? Why are you seeming silent? But he has been faithful to equip us. He doesn't always give us what we're asking for, but he has been faithful to carry us through.
Sarah, I found it interesting the way you write your book. And I'm not a reader of books, and I'm not a writer, so I'm not a good critique artist. But nonetheless, some things that stood out to me is you open up this book and say, "Look, I don't have an answer. I don't have the answer."
Mm-hmm.
That if somebody sees your book and sees the title, they say, "Oh gosh, I'm going through a storm. This book will fix my problem." No.
Yeah. No. No, definitely not. I think that's why we wanted to say that right from the beginning, because I think our tendency is to just want answers. And so we didn't want people to pick it up and think, this is where I'm going to find basically the solution to my problem. Yeah. So we wanted to be upfront with that, but we also equally said, we're in this with you. We're still wrestling through this too. So the reason we're not giving you answers as to what solutions there are is because God hasn't given us those answers. And so, but what we can give you is what God has given us in our struggles and through his word, that we want to then be able to help others see in their own struggles. So we are not marriage experts. We are still on our own journey. We are still learning and growing together and healing. So we just wanted to bring the reader along with us in that journey to help them see that they're not alone in it. We're going through that with them.
The other thing that I don't know if it's odd because I don't read enough books to say this, but it seems to me as I read the book, it's like you're talking to me. You're not just giving an account. You'll state a few facts, a few circumstances, a few events, and then you say, "Look now, let me tell you something." Yeah, and then you kind of switch gears and you start talking to the reader. I guess that's intentional.
Yeah, it's very intentional. I think we really wanted to give enough of our circumstances and enough of us that we were able to give the feeling that we're walking alongside of people. But we also didn't want it to be about us. It's not really that helpful to people just to read our testimony or to read what's happening in our life. So we wanted to give enough, but not so much that we were the focus point. And also, a lot of people are going through things that are different than us. So if they couldn't relate specifically to our situation, then really it wouldn't have been a helpful book to them. So we wanted to give a broad spectrum. This is really the truths we learn in any type of trial, and anything that happens in our life, it affects our marriage in all these different ways. So how can we show you that this is how it's played out in our marriage, but ultimately show you this is the truth that we're clinging to, that we want to offer to you as well?
Yes, when you start bearing your soul the way you do in this book, at some point you must have concerns. I mean, about privacy, and is there things you had to leave out of the book because they were just too private or too intimate?
Oh yeah. That was actually a real challenge for us, because there's certain circumstances that we face that we need to protect the ones involved in that circumstance. So there's actually some very major parts to our life that are barely talked about in the book, and it's the way the Lord has allowed it. But we had to be careful. It's hard to give enough that you help the reader know, look, we can understand to some extent, this is some of what we've gone through, but without giving too much at the same time. And also, I think giving too much sometimes isn't helpful. Then I think it makes people fixate kind of on what you have going on, or maybe they think, gosh, they're going through all of that. I shouldn't even be complaining. Well, no, that's not true. God has given us all a different lot, and he is teaching us all at different stages and at different levels. And so we didn't want that to become what people focused on. But we really prayed a lot as we wrote, because we really wanted to be wise in how much we shared that would be helpful, but also being wise with privacy and, all of that you have to hash out.
I see your social media stuff, and oftentimes in your social media post, it's you and Jeff, you and Jeff, you and Jeff, you and Jeff. But in the part of the book I've read, Jeff's in the back seat if he's there at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a good portion of our marriage. That was actually a lot of what led to some real deep challenges for us relationally. He had been on call as a trauma consultant. So basically 24/7, he had a pager that he, at the drop of a hat, if he got paged, he had to rush out of the house to help kind of walk the doctor through implanting medical devices. And so that was okay when we didn't have kids, but once we started having kids, and then as life got really hard, that just became more and more difficult, not only just practically because I had a lot on my plate and I needed his help, but even relationally, because there was a lot of situations where he would have to leave during some really difficult things.
Mm-hmm.
And it just began to wear on us that I couldn't count on him for anything. We had to drive to church in 2 cars. We had to drive everywhere in 2 cars. So it took its toll on us more and more, and I think even more than we are realizing. So that was really it was 9 years of our marriage. And so if you can tell, a lot's going to build in that 9 years. And that's what we had to work through once he changed industries.
I've known, coaches. I've been in the service industry also. I wasn't implanting surgical devices, but I was fixing mission critical communications apparatus. Okay, so yeah, I've gotten those calls too, and it leads to friction, stress, friction, and ultimately conflict. And from time to time, I would remind my wife, this is what you signed up for. This is who I am. Mm-hmm. Did you ever hear those words?
Oh yeah. That was kind of our push and pull the whole time, because I knew that. I knew we had signed up for this. I really, every time he went out the door, I said to myself, I know he wants to be home. I know that this is not something he would be choosing to leave in this situation. So we had that tension because really nobody was the enemy here. It just was plain difficult, and there was no perfect solution. And so I think it came down to just really a handful of times that we had a really more like an emergency situation that he got caught between, do I choose to stay home for what my family needs, or do I leave? And a few of them he left. And it hurt so deeply that it just took a lot of years to rebuild really what that spoke volumes to me. And he would have said he felt this tension because as a man, he was trying to provide. So he was trying to be a good hard worker, loyal to his physicians that he was working for. And I knew that, I did, but it came down to, is there ever going to be a point where he will choose me over a doctor? And I started to wonder if that was ever going to be the case. So we had a lot to work through. I think God really held us up in that time for things we just couldn't handle. At the time, we were so on survival that we couldn't really even talk through this stuff that much because he was in and out so much. So God kind of took us through a couple years of breaking down old patterns and having to go deep and talk about some really difficult things. And it was painful. It took a long time. It took counsel, and it took the Lord doing a miraculous work of healing to be where we are now.
Sarah, I haven't read enough of the book that gets into when he lost his job, but I wanted to spend a moment. A lot of people right now are without work, and you had a period of time that Jeff was without work. First of all, I want to tell you, or any wife or woman, female listening, when a man loses his job, his pride is hurt. There's things we can't understand about you, but there's things you can't understand about us. We are very deeply hurt, more so than now.
Yeah.
And I look back on some times when I was without work, and I'm recalling some just gut wrenching moments. I'll summarize one. I wanted to watch. My daughter was a cheerleader, cheerleading is expensive. It's every dad's dream, you know. Had to go to cheerleading camp. It really hurts. I don't want to get that personal, but what could you share with us as that moment that you felt the most heartache, the most grief, the most gut-wrenching time that challenged your everything and your whole world's falling apart? Because, you know, the reason I want to talk about this is I think some people are going to be in that situation very soon with what is happening right now.
Yeah. You know what, to be honest, we're in that place in many ways right now. He's actually out of work again. He had been hired by a startup company, and the company ended up having some major financial problems only 3 months after they hired him. So he ended up losing that job along with most of the company. And that was, I believe, 5 months ago now. So we've had another season. But I do remember probably the most difficult time was when he had left that job. He took a huge sacrifice. We both did. He left that industry because he began to see the Lord was leading him out of it for what was happening to our family. And that was hard. I agree with you. It was, he was good at what he did. He was proud of it. But it was the right thing to do, but it was difficult. And then right after he left that, about a year later, he lost that job because of, again, a company issue. And so we really wrestled with struggling with the Lord led us here. Why did he lead us here knowing that this would happen? It was so confusing. And isn't that what happens in life? We kind of picture how God's going to respond when we take steps of faith. Well, he's surely going to bless me now. But it doesn't always look the way we think it's going to look. And I remember him really struggling deeply. And then from my perspective, I was battling fear and I was battling confusion. And so we were both kind of going through this. But actually there ended up being, I want to say, a really sweetness that came out of that season, because the Lord used that absolute dependence that we were suddenly dependent on the Lord for our basic needs. We ended up on food stamps. And so we went from being very financially comfortable to suddenly having no income. And
That
so
hurts.
that was really hard. It really hurt. I mean, it was talk about stripping pride right and left and stripping away everything you have put any sense of dependence on. And so I just see how God actually used that to unify us. And it's so hard. I don't want to diminish that. It was gut-wrenching, as you said, hard. Not only that, but everything else going on. And we know many people that are in that place right now. And I just guess I would encourage them that God is always at work. And so often we can't see what's happening. But these seasons that feel like we're losing so much, the Lord has so much to give us in these seasons as we turn and we learn to depend on him in a totally new way. And that really ended up being a gift. It grew our marriage, as hard as it was. And this season is doing the same. It's difficult. We have plenty of tears. We have lots of things we have to work through of worrying about. But it is, again, teaching us, do we really depend and trust that the Lord is going to be our provider? It may not look like getting the income we want, but how are we going to trust that we can wait on him, as difficult as that is? And it's been really neat for me to watch Jeff be a leader in that. I've seen God grow so much humility in him to lead us in being humbly submissive to the Lord's leading in his life, as hard as that is, knowing he doesn't have a job. And it's led me to do the same, which has been such a gift.
We got 1 minute, maybe two left. Okay, so other members of the family say, you know, there's things you can do, and they start telling you you're managing this wrong, and you're a victim because you've put yourself in that position. You hear that kind of stuff?
Yeah, usually I'd say it's more subtle than outright. I think that's a tendency we naturally have, is we are just cause and effect people. We think if you do this, you've brought that on yourself. And isn't that, we go through Job, that's Job's friends in the Bible. Job, you must have sinned. This is why God is pouring all this wrath out on you. And so that does, it makes you wrestle even more. It makes that grief compound, because not only are you struggling with those questions, but you have people heaping guilt on you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been really important to know, what is the truth. What do I listen to, and what do I have to filter out, as knowing that is not the truth God has for me, and that's not helpful. And you can't change people's views of you. I think we've had to learn that. We have to rest in our identity in Christ, and not in what people think of us. I mean, because there's always going to be people that have perspectives. Many people don't see what happens in our home. And so we have people that kind of assume things aren't as bad. But we don't have to go out and trying to convince them, no, it's really, really bad, because we know the Lord sees. And the Lord sees everybody else who is in their own lonely place right now, many isolated. It's just such an encouragement that He is there even when others aren't or can't understand.
Well, Sarah, we are out of time. We've got another guest coming in at the bottom of the hour. We appreciate you sharing, and your book is available on Amazon. If everybody will go, instead of buying the book, just send the money directly to your PayPal account. You can buy the book later.
Either way works.
And is that book available now? Together Through the Storms is the book I'm referring to. Is it? I know that your publicist was kind enough to send me one, but I don't know if they're actually available yet.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, they actually just released on Friday, May 1st. So you can get them on Amazon or the Good Book Company or major retailers.
Okay. Well, Sarah, I'm glad that you have the bravery and you have wisdom beyond your years in sharing your stories. And I hope that if somebody is watching or hearing this, whether now or in the future, who is about to give up, will know that God has never and will never give up on us. He says so repeatedly. He will not leave or forsake us. But sometimes I would scream out, well, where are you, God? I believe you in everything, but where are you exactly? Why are you hiding from me? While are we playing this? But Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, and we wish you the best, and keep us informed as things unfold, because the story never really ends, does it?
Yeah.
Appreciate it, Sarah.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. Well, thank you for having me.
Glad to do it. Thank you. Sarah Walton talking about, well, her life and her new book, Together Through the Storms. What an inspirational, is that the word I'm looking for? Inspirational story. Okay, in a few moments we will have, as always, Michelle Medlock Adams at the bottom of the hour, but she has conspired with her partner in crime, Bethany Jett, to join us, and they are going to talk about moms, because Mother's Day is right around the corner. And they literally wrote the book on motherhood, or they wrote a book on motherhood. How's that? Folks, that's coming up in a few minutes. I've got to tear things down, build things back up, and we will be back in just a few minutes. And as I leave, I will ask you 2 questions, and then we will consider a challenge together. First question: what is the boldest thing you have ever done for Jesus Christ? The second question is, well, when was that? See, the challenge that I have taken on in my life, and I hope that you will too, is to never be satisfied with either